Hey everyone, welcome back to part 3 in our ongoing series, How to Model a Gold Mill in 27,000 Easy Steps. Today we're going to start at the Waldorf town site and then head uphill to the Santiago Mine Mill complex. We'll take a look around, see what's there today, try to get an idea what the purpose of each structure was and roughly when it was built, and we'll also throw in some photos giving kind of a 20-year retrospective on what used to be there and what has fallen over since and when. Today we'll be looking around mainly outside, trying to get a feel for how everything is laid out and where it is. And then in our next episode, we'll actually go inside the mill itself and do the same thing again. Thank you for joining us today. Let's take a look. From the Waldorf town site, a 2-mile drive over rough roads is required to reach the Santiago Mine and Mill. Before leaving Waldorf, let's look at the water pump that supplied water from a local stream source to the Santiago. We will discuss the pump technology later. Right now, note the deterioration of the pump house. Our own earliest photos from 2002 show it is still standing, but the front wall was leaning precariously. The pump pistons and connecting rods were also still installed. By 2006, a photo we found online showed that the front wall had collapsed and most likely been carted off for someone's campfire. The pistons had also been stolen by souvenir collectors or scrappers, probably for brass components. By 2010, most of the remaining shed had collapsed. It remains in this condition today. The path to the Santiago is rocky and washed out in places. It is maintained by the Forest Service only well enough to permit 4x4 and other off-road capable vehicles. At 5 to 10 miles per hour, it takes about 15 minutes to reach the mill. We did have partial cellular phone reception on McClellan Mountain, but just in case, a paper Forest Service map is a good resource to have available in the backcountry. Okay, the site layout around the Santiago, clockwise from top left. The mine portal and cart track, the sampling shed and an early 1900s ore dump. At far right, a foundation for what was probably the mining company office and/or a maintenance workshop. An unknown ruin built from milled lumber just below that. Closer to the mill, an early 1900s cabin or supply shed built partly underground. Then we have the mill itself along with its water tank and trestle to the ore dump. And finally, an early 1900s ore chute and aerial tram to Waldorf. Since July of 2019, the mill and the immediate area surrounding it have been closed by the Forest Service so that restoration and continuing remediation work can proceed undisturbed. Visitors are greeted with signs at the front gate indicating that they may approach for a viewing, but no further. Next to the parking area is a concrete foundation that we believe was the mining company office and/or a maintenance facility. Author Muriel Wolle, whose work was quoted in our second episode, refers to a mining office somewhere in this location. An active mine requires a great deal of vocational technical skilled labor to maintain equipment in good working order. That includes metalwork, plumbing, electrical, and carpentry. So there would have been a maintenance shop somewhere on the property. That same building would likely have housed a large air compressor used to operate pneumatic drills and hoists inside the mine. This building is a likely candidate. The horizontal stripe lines visible on the concrete here are typical of pre-World War II construction. Plywood was only introduced to the U.S. market around 1928, I believe, and was not a common building product prior to the 1950s. Concrete pours up through the 1940s were typically formed using scraps of milled lumber which left these irregular patterns. And commonly the lumber was valuable enough that when the forms were torn down, it was reused in the construction. We're not sure what this structure was for, although the use of milled lumber, now visible mainly as the remnants of floor joists, indicates it was constructed around the same time as the mill or after. One possibility is that this was the mining company office and the previous structure was strictly the maintenance facility and workshop. Closer to the mill is a structure of hand-hewn logs and boards in the pioneer style, which dates it back to around 1900. This may have been a cabin or supply shed. The ore dump near the sampling shed is also built with hand-hewn logs and boards. It was probably used to collect ore from other mines on McClellan Mountain for transport to Waldorf over the road, and then later, when the Santiago was built, it would have gone there instead. The sampling shed would have contained a laboratory of small-scale milling equipment and assaying tools. The sampling process would have been used to assess ore deposits in the mine and also to review the recovery efficiency of ongoing processes in the mill. Ore dumps taken from other sources would also be assayed to determine the owner's share of the payout before entering the mill process. The sampling shed is the only structure on the site which includes finished-grade siding materials and shows remnants of gypsum drywall or plasterboard and fiberglass insulation. It was probably retrofitted during or sometime after the 1950s to improve temperature regulation. Beyond the sampling shed, we now approach the mine portal and see the rails that carried ore carts from the portal over to the Santiago. Still on the tracks today are a large ventilation fan structure and a compressed air reservoir, both of which would have serviced the mine tunnels. An outer security gate made of bars provided security for a large diesel tank, and then a high-security inner gate restricted access to the portal. Also visible from inside the portal entrance is a drain pipe which collected drainage water from the Santiago mine and delivered it to a storage tank at the mill. Although the mine is private property, cavers and urbexers regularly broke the locks, which is how we found it in both 2002 and 2010. Since abandoned mines are attractive nuisances and subject to voids, collapses, toxic gas accumulations, and other hazards, the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management make a habit of permanently sealing them to discourage exploration. During remediation work on the Santiago tailings pile in 2017 and 2018, Santiago Mine Portal was permanently buried. The early 1900s ore chute and aerial tram to Waldorf were covered previously. If you missed it, check out episode 2, Waldorf and the Argentine District, and skip ahead to the 8-minute and 20-second mark. We haven't located many photos of the Santiago from its earliest days, but this one that we introduced in our second episode is almost certainly pre-World War II. Sometime after the war, a Georgetown resident named Douglas Marshall renovated and reopened the mill. The structure, as it sits today, has a somewhat different window and door layout, along with a loading dock and access road in front of the mill that do not appear in the original design. The mill exterior walls, in both its original and later forms, appear to have been weatherproofed using only cheap tar felt. Although the oil-impregnated textile was not strictly durable in exposed construction, it would have been relatively easy to replace as needed. The rails from the mine portal to the mill originally passed over a substantial trestle in order to reach the dump window at the top of the mill. In 2002 and 2003, we found it still standing and in relatively good condition. By 2010, the trestle was still upright, but a major section had broken loose from the support and was beginning to sag. Sometime between 2010 and 2013, photos and videos we have found online indicate that most of the trestle had collapsed. The remaining bits appear to have been moved to a location behind the mill when the tailings were remediated in 2017 to 2018, and today there is nothing left to see but a pile of heavy scrap lumber. Another addition was the 1948 water tank made from barrel-type construction. The 3,700-gallon water tank, constructed from wood using the barrel stave and banding technique, remains standing for now. It has changed very little since we started visiting the site. It had two primary water sources: a pipe from the Santiago Mine portal, portions of which can still be found between the former portal and the mill, and the water pump at the Waldorf town site that we looked at back at the beginning. There is also evidence inside the mill that some water drained from the mill processes was recycled by an electric pump. The mill itself has been subject to severe weather damage over the years. Our own early photos indicate the mill had once been roofed using tar felt and various asphalt shingling materials, but by 2010, those were severely damaged. Sometime between 2010 and 2012, the gabled roof to the ore dump tower was completely blown away. By 2016, it appears that the Forest Service had restored the roof, but the replacement was blown off again in 2017. In very late 2017, we found video evidence that the roof had been restored again, and by summer 2018, while remediation work was ongoing, the rear wall was being completely rebuilt. During our 2019 visit, we found that the restoration of the ore dump roof and the rear wall was complete, and the entire roofed surface had been replaced with some sort of low-maintenance steel. Well, everyone, that's a wrap for today's episode. Again, in part 4 of our series coming up, I want to go inside the mill itself and take a look around, kind of like what we did today, but on the interior of the mill instead of the exterior of the complex. We'll also begin taking a few measurements in Google Earth and get an idea, what are our dimensions going to be for the foundation of this building? Join us next time. Has anyone seen my phone?